Welcome to 86 Special, hosted by me, Hernan Stutzer. I have worked in the restaurant business for the last 30 years. I have gone from being a dishwasher in the dish pit until my fingers pruned. I have gone from being a busser, a waiter, and now I have become a restaurant owner. I have created this podcast to talk to people in the industry because I want to know their stories, their struggles, their wins, and everything in between. These are people that have been in the mud day in and day out, trying to do their best for their clients. These are stories that you won't find on the menu. Every day, us restaurant owners, we hear about star restaurants closing down.
It's tough to get somebody to understand that the foundation of your home is brick by brick, and it takes time.
You actually remember the moment that you said, wow, I'm in love with cooking. I can't have enough.
I mean, I always was. I sit there and I talk about, having the influence of Chef Grant and Chef Thomas and then talk about the earlier times, as a child being there at my parents' restaurant and how influential that was.
Blue sky, sunshine, coffee with you. How does it feel like I already knew? You in a past life, it's 1:45. How did it happen? Clock can't be true.
86 Special. Chef David, thank you so much for being the first guest on 86 Special. We're just excited and delighted to have you.
Well, it's a treat and an honor. I appreciate it.
So, while navigating the internet and searching for Chef David Carrier, these are some of the things that we found.
Oh, shit.
Often mistaken for a linebacker, David is known for his gregarious personality. A graduate of the Culinary Institute, he moved across country to work with some of the nation's best chefs, Thomas Keller at the French Laundry and Grant Achatz at Trio. Chef David has a magical place where ingredients are treated like the most important guest in the house. What else can you tell me about Chef David?
Wow, it's hard hitting right out of the gate, huh? I've been blessed and fortunate to have been chosen, I guess, by this, this career. I grew up in the industry. I watched my mom and dad do it. In my opinion, they were probably some of the best front of the house people that one would ever meet. And then, to your point, I got the opportunity to work with some of the best chefs, if not the best chefs in the country, and was able to absorb and to suck all that up. So, I think it's created a very well-rounded hospitality person, in my opinion, and I enjoy conversations with the guests and providing wonderful service as much as I enjoy plucking a beautiful piece of fish out of the water and treating it perfectly. So it's just a lot of what is out there is obviously based on the cooking aspect of what it is, that I've had in my career. And I've been blessed and fortunate to throw down in many of these kitchens. Lucky, really. And what often isn't understood or known is that upbringing that I had. And the true sense of hospitality, although it was present at those restaurants that I worked at, but in my opinion, growing up in it is when it really made that impression. You learn so much when you're 8, 9, 10.
Yep.
And I was 8, 9, and 10 in a restaurant.
Correct.
So that was a ton of fun.
Good. Well, we brought a little rosé from Mendoza, Argentina to enjoy. I hope you don't mind. And
no, I won't have a problem with that.
And Vicky's bringing us some lamb empanadas to enjoy throughout.
Yeah.
I hope you like them.
Oh, heck yeah. They look delicious.
So at this point, we basically, I'm going to show you a few photographs. And I would like for you to just give me the first thing that comes to mind when you see them.
I mean, that's home. You know, the can I get it a little closer?
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, so I grew up right there in Hollis, right on the border of Queens Village. So on the east side of Hollis. And then my mother's restaurant was, they don't have it listed. Let me see here. There it is. Woodside, right there. So, yeah, this is home. You know, this is...
How was it growing up in Queens?
I mean, it was awesome. I mean, we had my mother and father met in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, and my father moved from New Ulm, Minnesota, and my mother from La Bay, which is off the Saguenay River in Quebec. So probably about 2 hours or so north of Quebec City. So they came down. My mom came down on an opera scholarship, and my dad was a stage actor. So
Nice.
Many stage actors get into the restaurant business, and he worked at some really cool places, the old Spindle Top, the Copa, and eventually my mom and him married. They had their first apartment down on West 4th Street. They had my eldest sister in 68, and then they moved to Queens. They moved to Astoria, and my dad worked at a restaurant there called the Piccola di Venezia, which, as of about a year or so ago, was still operational.
Oh, wow.
From the story that I understand is that the building it was in was torn down. They're rebuilding it, and then it'll go back in. Mm-hmm. So it's on a hiatus, per se. And my dad was the first maitre d' there. And my folks moved into Hollis after my sister Denise was born in 72. So between 72 and 76, when I came around, they moved to Hollis so that they could have a backyard. And then my dad traveled to Astoria, and then eventually when it came time for him to venture off on his own, he found a location in Woodside. And that was in about 78, 79.
How do you connect with the Canadian side of your family through your mom?
You know, that's a good question. It's hard to almost answer it because it was always there. So it wasn't like the Canadian side. It was just the side. It was what, my mother, was. And she was a caring, nurturing, loving woman. And she was just a tiny little thing. And
well, I got to meet her.
Yeah,
I was blessed enough to having met your mom.
Yeah.
And the way she just looked at you and watched you work.
Yeah, she was quite a spectacular individual. And, her... we grew up with a French accent in the house, and that was something that was just awesome and always appreciated. And many of my relatives speak very little English, So, but much like I associate, like my mother was Canadian, and it's not so much that I like what is the Canadian side. It's moreover I'm a product of her. So. Correct. And as a result, I'm, a product of Canada perhaps as well. And yeah, I mean, there were foods that, we can associate, but it was just a loving, caring, nurturing, let's have a cold beer, even though it's negative 42 outside, All
right, we're going to move on to photo number 2. What comes to mind?
Yeah, my mom and dad, they were opera singers, and that's what brought them together. They shared the same music coach, and the artwork on the wall over there is kind of an homage to them and many of their inspirations and such. So my dad was a prompter at the old Metropolitan Opera House, and my mother sung. So so that's I see that, and I automatically will gravitate towards,
Very cool.
come up towards my folks.
Very nice. Move to photo number 3. For those of you listening, it's a facade of a building in Astoria, New York.
Hey, that's it. That's the old Piccola di Venezia. Yeah, so that building apparently has been torn down.
Mm-hmm.
And they're building many stories for obvious financial, goals and reasons and such.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but, there's actually a guy who lives here in town who flies up to New York every other month or so to eat at that restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's funny how your past kind of,
Follows you.
yeah. And it,
When did he stop working at Piccolo di Venezia?
about 78,
Okay.
when he started the Maitre d', which was the name of his restaurant.
Do you have any memories of this restaurant?
Oh, vivid. I still smell it,
Yeah.
So,
Well, I saw photos of the actual dining room, and it's anything you would imagine from an Italian restaurant in New York.
in the 70s.
Carpet in the 70s.
Early 80s. Yeah, no, it's, carpet, and yeah, it's I could still smell it, Every time I walk through my restaurant here, and I'd make sure the stoves are turned off, I'm brought back to the time when I did it, 6, 7, 8 years old,
Mm-hmm.
With my dad, closing the restaurant up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was neat.
Good. All right, we're gonna go to photo number 4. Another facade. This one a little bit different.
Yeah, where is that? I'm not familiar with that place.
Sure.
Yeah, that's so I got super lucky. When I was in college, I worked with I went to school in upstate New York, Casanova, and it is recently closed. But there was this old historic inn, and this fellow by the name of Oscar Rhodes went in there and took the restaurant over. And Oscar he would tell you a story, and you would call bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
and then down the road, unprompted, something would present itself that would prove that story was actually true. Oscar was very much like the character in Big Fish, very just. I mean, I think almost that movie could have been written about him, and well, anyway, he and his wife, they had like 3 or 4 places they were going to move to, and they wanted to start a newspaper. Because at the time, he was in central New York. He was Californian. He was in central New York because his wife was finishing up her career with Carrier Corp, the air conditioning company out of Syracuse. And no relation.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunate. And so they chose Yountville, and she started the paper, the Yountville Sun. Well, anyway, that process, or with that whole thing, Oscar became dubbed the paper boy. And much like any other time in his life, he walked into a room and everybody would know him. So he met TK, and right around the time I was in culinary school, they were doing the Stellar Keller dinner at the Beard House. And it was Joseph Keller, Thomas's brother, and Thomas. Stephen Durfee was there, the pastry chef at the time. And this was my first. And anyway, so they were going out there and to tie it together. Oscar said, "Hey, one of my, sons, or one of my guys is out there, and he, he's going to volunteer with you." So Oscar calls me and doesn't ask me to do it. Tells me I'm going to do it, and sure enough, I did it. And I had been to his house in Yountville and seen the building, and knew of it. Did not really understand the magnitude of it. Mind you, this is probably about 4 or 5 years after it had opened. So this is probably around 94 or 98, 99, 97, 98, somewhere in there. So the restaurant was still in its infancy, or in somewhat of its infancy, or at least under TK's control and such. So anywho, so I get there, and I'm just cooking, and I was just blown away. And the service staff got there, and Stephen and Joseph who's wearing cologne, who is that? As 15 service members pass us, and they're all like, whoa. And they politely asked the individual to, either change or, I don't know. I don't remember them sending him home but anyway, but it was just like, wow. I was just amazed. And obviously everything that we were playing with and the foods that we were cooking was it was stunning. It was amazing. What a crash course, And TK walks in, and it was, it just the aura of everything when he walked in. It was just, and I'm not a person to get starstruck or anything like that, but it was just so like, it was almost like a deity walking into the room, And anywho, at the end of it, like he probably said to half the people volunteering there, or he said, hey, if there's anything I could do for you, let me know. So I finished school, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to go into a place and, stand in the corner and peel vegetables. And I staged and looked at a couple of different places and such, but something kept calling me back to this. So I reached out, and he said, sure. And so I get out there, and I had probably a week left of school, and I told him I could be there in 2 weeks, and that's that. I lived with Oscar and Sharon for for the first 6 months or so, maybe 3 or 4, and boy, was I a fish out of water. Holy fuck!
What was it like coming from Queens and moving to Yountville?
Well, I think when you grow up in a city, you have an ability to be a little bit more of a chameleon. And I only say that because I feel as if I'm a chameleon, and I feel as if it's because of my upbringing, which was a city. I'm not to say that, you grow up in the sticks and you can't do it. But I think it's easier to adapt to slow than it is to adapt to fast. And it was different, but it was warm. It was a community. It was a world of hospitality through wine, through food. So everybody that lived there, it was like literally, it was a college campus, if you think about it, and it was amazing. From, a cold Rolling Rock after the shift at Ponch's, to the smell of the wine, the juice fermenting, to chilly mornings. It was just, it was the people. It was truly amazing. And one of the first days I'm there, I get sent out into the garden. At that time, it was just probably like 5 or 6 raised beds. It really wasn't what it is today. And I'm out there harvesting some microgreen, and I'm just doing my thing, and I hear this. And I'm like, what the, think I'm like a spaceship or something, like I'm getting abducted, and just blown away. And I look up, and I swear to God, I could touch the basket. It wasn't 40, 50 feet above me. I couldn't see the sky because I was directly underneath this hot air fucking balloon. And it was just bright and colorful. And I was just like, what the, like, how did I get here? Oh my gosh. And so, and then obviously the 2 years that I spent there was just incredibly inspiring. And it was a time when, he was in the kitchen every day. I remember him collecting us and putting us into the dining room, and the meeting started with wearing its Eric Zebo. They called him out, and he was at that time just promoted to his chef de cuisine, the first chef de cuisine of the restaurant, and it was just this, like, there was a bit of like a jovialness with respect to everybody, and TK slides off his Birkenstocks, and Eric Zebo, EZ, calls him out and says, "White socks, chef?" Like, what? And TK starts explaining, as he was explaining why you handle a piece of foie gras in the way that you handle the piece of foie gras, or the fava bean the way you handle fava bean, as to why he wears white socks. And it was comical. And that's how the meeting started. And then the meeting went on to talk to us about the milestone that we were about ready to to approach, and that was the menu going to 3 figures from 2 figures.
Wow.
And how much pressure and such was to be put on us, and the significance of it, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it was an amazing time. And I tell you, I would love to work in that kitchen today, and you know what it's become, and just I would love to spend, you know, but I wouldn't trade the time I was there for fucking anything.
Amazing. We're gonna move to last photo. What do you have to tell me about that?
I hate food photography.
Mm-hmm.
It's so difficult to, you know, a plate can leave the kitchen with, well, I love food photography. I just think that it's more than just snapping a photo, and a photo is just at everybody's fingertips today, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it really requires talent and a skill that nobody with an iPhone, or I wouldn't say nobody, but most people with an iPhone don't possess. I don't possess it, you know, and you snap a shot and it's just like, wow. So I look at that and I'm happy with the color of the meat. I'm happy with the crisp skin.
So we're looking at a porchetta, right?
Porchetta, yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm happy because, you know, the guy who raises it, you know, he's the guy who brings it to the back door, you know, so I'm happy that I did him right. I'm happy that I did the animal, you know, right. But, you know, I look at everything else around it, and it's just very matted, and it's very dark, deep. And I mean, they look like some braised greens and some braised, you know, cooking in this realm, you know, you're going to get that color profile sometimes when when you cook a little bit more.
So what is the creative process for a new dish at Woodside?
You know, as it was with, you know, a lot of the places that, you know, it's just a casual conversation. You know, sometimes it's like, hey, I had this, or what if we did this, or hey, I saw this. And today it's so much easier just with, you know, all the social media that's out there. Correct. You know, where I can see what somebody's doing across the world, you know, or the other side of the world, and look at that, and I say, oh, that would be cool if I did this, or if I took this and did that, and blah blah blah. And gaining inspiration is a lot easier.
Do you remember what was your first composed dish?
You know, honestly, it was probably in culinary school, and we had to put together this menu, and I'm sure I have it somewhere. We had to take photos of it, going back to photos, and I look back at it, and I'm just, it's, you know, this is, you know, late 90s, 2000, and it's funny because the judge, or the panel, was led by Annie Burrell. And so I put forth the menu and cooked the food, and, you know, presented it to her, and she was so wonderful with her feedback, and it was awesome. And I look back at that dish, and I'm like, wow, that's silly. And it was, God, I think I did quail or something. And the idea was there, you know, the conception of the dish was there, but the execution was that of somebody graduating culinary school. So, you know, maybe I go back and I revisit it, and then I take that same inspiration and then plug it into a menu today. But yeah, she was very gracious with her feedback, and actually later on down the road, I find out that she was actually the sister of one of the guys who lived in Cazenovia, who was a friend of mine while I was in college.
Wow.
And I only found that
Small
out.
world.
Yeah, I only found that out, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later. But yeah.
Do you actually remember the moment that you said, wow, I'm in love with cooking. I can't have enough?
I mean, I always was. You know, I sit there and I talk about, having the influence of Chef Grant and Chef Thomas, and then talk about the earlier times, as a child being there at my parents' restaurant, and how influential that was. But I also spent a lot of time in that kitchen, and I would go home and I would mimic it. And I can remember looking at a recipe one time. My mom loved cooking in a crock pot, and my wife hates it, which is kind of funny, but I understand the love of it, and I can understand the hate of it. So I was looking at a recipe, and I wanted to make dinner one time, and I literally and it was a recipe that called for dredging the chicken, searing the chicken, then putting the chicken into the crock pot, and then going on with the cooking and the preparation. Well, I just took everything. I just went down the ingredient list and just dumped it all in the crock pot. I can remember taking pumpkin and wanting to make a pumpkin pie and scooping out the seeds and the stringy shit that's in the inside of the pumpkin, and throwing away the good part of the pumpkin, picking out the seeds, and wondering why the fuck my pumpkin pie looks like a plate of spaghetti. So I mean, cooking is something that's always, always got my attention. Come from a very creative, artistic family, and they were into the performing arts and such, and I was into the culinary arts.
So Saturday night, full restaurant. Do you ever come out of the kitchen to see your guests' faces when they try your food?
Yeah, so that's a conundrum, because although we have 8 tables in here, you can't like sneak to one without sneaking to the others, and it's hard, in my opinion, to get out here. And if I come out into the kitchen when the dining room is full, I'm not getting back into the kitchen for a good 20-30 minutes. And not that the team in the kitchen can't do it, but my focus and my goal is to make sure that I'm controlling the dining room, managing the dining room, leading the dining room through the kitchen. And then at the end of the night, towards the tail end of the evening, when there's a few tables, I'll try to come out and we have a kitchen table experience here where we get to see that, and it's firsthand. So, that's neat. But yeah, I try to stay out, because if I go in, or if I come out I stay out of the kitchen. Excuse me, I stay out of the dining room, because if I get out here, then it can just.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it can cripple things, because I'm just, I don't know. I just, it's and we're this community that we live in. What I mean, these folks are coming in, and they're guests, and there's, it's no different from them if they were coming into our home. And that's kind of how I feel it.
So speaking of front of the house, in Will Withouta's book Unreasonable Hospitality, Simon Sinek wrote, when Will set out to make 11 Madison Park the best restaurant in the world, he had a crazy idea about how to do it. Witauta asked, quote, what would happen if we approach hospitality with the same passion, attention to detail, and rigor that we bring to our food? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's just it's he's so revolutionary in his, but it's also like one of those things where it's like so obvious, but yet it wasn't happening. And a lot of it probably has to do with, the drive and the ego and of a chef. But it really is, it's a total experience. You have to be able to, going out and dining is more than just the food. And you walk into, Alinea, or you walk in, and that just walking in through those doors, that's an experience in and of itself. How the hallway narrows, and it's just so well thought out. And then the same with the blue door at the French Laundry, or walking past that, the hanging vines. and such. But it's something that is equally as important, as the food. And I can remember, listening to chefs, when we were talking about, cocktails and alcohol. Why is somebody, drinking a neat whiskey prior to the meal? They're ruining their palate, and then you fast forward 20 years and now they're pairing, courses with, with alcohol. But it's something that had to happen, it's something that needed to happen. And I'm glad that somebody has, put the spotlight on it. And
I agree. I totally agree. So every day, us restaurant owners, we hear about star restaurants closing down.
And it's funny when you say star restaurants, because you look at, having worked in 5-star and working in Michelin, a lot of the standards that have to be hit. Okay, I would argue that, or it's fact that like 90% of that is everything other than the food on the plate. It's how you were treated when you called to make a reservation, how you were greeted, how the server, all the points. So when a chef sits and says, I'm a 5-star chef or something, your food handled that 10% that it needed to happen, and that's that's nothing to you should be proud of that, but at the end of the day, it's the warm fuzzies that they get, when they sit down and when they do those things that Will writes about in his book. Those are the things that really truly solidify, in my opinion, that experience.
So what are the biggest challenges for you in the restaurant business in 2025?
Obviously a lot of it's labor driven. A lot of the old guard is, moved on, and, they're either, gone to selling wine or, working for Cisco or whatever. But a lot of the old guard is gone, and we rely heavily on this generation that's coming up. And, it's a different tough, and by no means do I suggest that, the antics and the, how some of this stuff is romanticized. I don't agree with any of that, but, being able to tell somebody that, you did the left, I need you to do the right. And then it's just a very simple matter of fact conversation, and then just how that's perceived. And, that's tough. Work ethic, is tough. People, it's for this generation coming up, everything's just readily available to them. There's an immediate gratification with everything that it is that they experienced. And, I've been doing this for 25 years now, and, I don't have the $100,000 car, and I don't have the, I have so much more, and so many, other, experiences and things like that, which I'm, thankful for and extremely rich with. But it's tough. It's tough to get somebody to understand that, the foundation of your home is brick by brick, and it takes time. And the more time you spend with it, the taller, the higher, the stronger your house will be. And
So
with the generation that's coming up with this immediate gratification, it's a concept that's very, very foreign. It's like, hey, I've worked here for 2 weeks. Where's my X? And that's a challenge.
To the recent graduates of any culinary school, what do you tell them? They want to open a restaurant. What do you tell them?
Follow your dreams, and I'm not one to, try to shatter something, but I would just try to give them the dose of reality, and the things that are romanticized, that's the 0.1%. The chances of that happening to you are slim to none, and they're even slimmer if you don't build that foundation. I said I would not work in a restaurant, peeling vegetables in the corner, and my first 6, 7, 8 months, almost a year at the French Laundry, that's what I did. And not only did I peel vegetables, I peeled vegetables that don't need peeling, and I peeled things that don't need to be peeled. I cut things that were small enough that didn't need to be cut, but we cut them anyway. And it was very, similar to that whole Karate Kid, the first one, of course, scenario. And at the time, I didn't realize it. And immediate gratification and things weren't at our fingertips as they are now. And I don't think somebody coming up could do what we did back then and have the patience for it. And I feel as if that patience for me paid off. Yeah, I think I think the labor force out there today, it's tough. And I'm speaking of this, and I'm sure, metropolated areas and larger markets probably have, their interpretation of what it is. But, I speak of this, living on a barrier island in the state of Georgia, where the stack of resumes on the desk is never more than 2 to 3 high.
Correct.
And I would assume that in that major market, it's at least 10 to 15. So, these observations are obviously based on, what I'm familiar with and such.
So shifting a little bit, what do you cook at home for you and your wife?
What do we cook at home? Well, my wife's been doing a lot of cooking lately, for herself. She'll leave the bakery and, at a reasonable time and, walk the dogs and, have a little bit more of a, a life outside of it.
Do you find the time to actually cook for each other?
Yeah, yes and no. We definitely close our businesses. Our businesses are closed Monday and Tuesday, so that gives us the opportunity to spend time with one another. And even within those time frames, where there's a project here, there's a project there that needs to be tended to and such. But we do make time to break bread with one another, whether it's, in our home, which we really enjoy. And we would love to get back to that where, it was not only we would cook for ourselves, but we would cook for friends and people would come over and bring food. And it was that's what it was like when we were, young and coming up in the industry. I would love to get back to that point at some time, but we're very simple when we prepare food. I think she's very extravagant, and her spice profile is, when she cooks at home, she's very she's very vegetable driven, and roasted chicken to go with it, and these beautiful stews, and that are inspired by her Sicilian background and such, and very light and fresh. We have a garden in the back that we try to keep up with, which is somewhat impossible, but so she's a lot of fresh. If there was, it's fresh. What we're doing, it's fresh and it's simple. It's definitely not in a crock pot.
So what would you say is the best filling for a sandwich?
The best filling for a sandwich?
Yeah.
Boy. Man. I mean, there's something that's just beautiful as, a baguette, good butter, and a good piece of ham. There's just something that, and then there's something about, what's inside of a grilled cheese, Right. So, and that's a tough answer. That's a tough question, in my opinion, because, I think that, we're around food all the time, and I think it makes our cravings that of like a pregnant woman. You know what I mean? So, we're very, at least I'm very, mood driven when it comes to food. So, right now you were to ask me, I would probably say, some nice bitter greens, a piece of pork, and, some scrambled eggs on a nice, hard roll.
Delicious.
I mean, I would tear that up right now.
So
Right?
in your restaurant, how do you balance tradition and innovation on a plate?
by staying true to what it is that, that you do, and who you are. And there's a personality of the chef, but there's also a personality of their food. And you can't deviate from that, and you have to stay true to that. And, if I came out and did some of the things that, are done by, some of these people that are really, really pushing the envelope, it wouldn't be real. It wouldn't be true. It's not my personality. That type of food is very cerebral, from the heart, but cerebral. What we try to do is a lot more from the heart, and a little less cerebral,
How do your roots actually show up on the plate?
It's a good question. I mean, I like to use carrots, and that's a root. Potatoes a root. So I think that's how roots would show up on on the plate. No, I think truth is a great root, and I think the ability to build on flavors and to just have a complexity, so that there's levels to the flavor, because that's something that was instilled throughout my career, whether it was, glorified peasant food that we were cooking at the French Laundry, because let's face it, a short rib, I mean, that's peasant. Kings weren't eating that, so whether it was that, or, some of the crazy things that we were doing, with food at Trio, it all tasted good.
Can a dish be powerful without being perfect?
But I mean, I don't think there's a chef out there that will say, that it's perfect, but our bar is where it is, and our guests' bar is, with any luck, it's below it, right? Because we're cooking for ourselves, and we're cooking for us, for them, but to feed us.
Correct.
Right, to be satisfied with it. And oftentimes the dish will fall in between, in that zone. And I think that's a decent zone to be in, because it surpasses the expectation of the guest, and then it gives you the opportunities to go back and just to try to get it to be a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better.
Well, actually, I've heard Keller say many times that perfection is never attained. It is a process that actually matters.
And that's what I'm essentially saying here. But yeah, getting to that point, it can always, you can always handle it a little bit differently. You can always approach it differently, and yeah, if it's perfect for the guest, ultimately it should be perfect for us, but that doesn't drive us.
Do you feel pressure ever to always being reinventing yourself and pushing the envelope, like you said?
So I don't feel that I push the envelope. I'm not that type of a cook. So I can only imagine, what it's like for those individuals to be constantly, because eventually, it's really truly amazing when you even writers get blocks, so, and eventually, even, creators of TV shows, Fonzie's jumping the shark, and it gets to the point where it's like, but some of these guys, they just keep going and going and going. And you're just like, where the fuck is it coming from? And it's quite amazing and fascinating, but there is, I don't know if they view their pressure like I view their pressure. But even with the style of food that we're doing here, yes, there is a pressure, And the pressure is more about the expectation that people are having and us living up to it. You know?
So going back to all these restaurants closing down, which sometimes they seem to be shocking that X, Y, or Z in Miami, where I used to take my wife, on a date, has closed down. Would you say that chefs are trying to find a balance between work and life? I mean, and kids and wife.
I mean, is that why the restaurant is closing? No, I mean, there's 104 reasons why, a restaurant can close. And, the restaurant that Ryan and I had our first date in is no longer around. He's the chef, Paul Kahan. He still has, concepts out there and restaurants out there. And, it comes to, I mean, honestly, it comes to a point, if you're lucky, where you can say, where it's run its course, and, will Alinea ever stop? I mean, I don't know, because he's been doing it for 20 years.
Correct.
And I remember being in the kitchen with him and chatting stuff up and what Alinea would become. And I never worked there, but I mean, it's still going. And it's still going, and it's constantly reinventing itself. And at this rate, yeah, it seems like it'll be around forever. The same could be said for, the French Laundry. And it's a business, and why did the shoe store down the street close? And is it because, he wanted to be with his family, or she wanted to be with her family? I mean, it happens. It's going to happen. It can't go on forever. There are so many heirloom restaurants that are out there that get passed on through generation to generation, and you never see them ending. But, the quality of life is, and the balance and such, I mean, that's your responsibility, because if it's not your restaurant, it's a restaurant you're working in. Or if it's not a restaurant you're working in, it's if you go into purveying and sales, it's meeting the cutoffs, and there's always something, and it's just about, making the best of the time that you have outside of the business. That is, I think, super important. But the quality of life piece is something that's becoming more and more spoken about.
Correct.
And the fact that more and more people are speaking about it is great, because there ought to be. But make no doubt about it, the responsibility is on the individual themselves, right? If I choose to sleep the entirety of my day, right? I mean, what's the balance there? There isn't. If I'm in the kitchen and I'm like, well, I got to get there at 6 a.m. because I got this and that and so many other things to do. Yeah, there are those days that present themselves, but what are you doing to be most efficient, instead of putting more hours on your day, how do you put more day in your hour? And those are the challenges, and those are the things that, as you grow and, as your body doesn't take what it could take, 20 years ago, those are the thoughts that you have to, have for yourself.
So you mentioned Alinea having been open for 20 years at the level that they have been performing. What gets Grant going every day to be able to keep it like this?
It's drive, it's drive, and it's the quest. And he's a very, very unique individual like that. And I've never, even when we worked together at the French Laundry, I mean, just how fixated and focused he was on whatever it is that he was doing. I mean, like a horse with blinders, he saw nothing but the prize that was ahead of him. And that's something that's his genetic makeup, that's his brain, and that's how it works. And I mean, it just seems like a reservoir that just won't drain out.
Are you chasing the star here at Woodside?
I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. When we were flipping burgers next door, yes and no. And there's a mindset and a philosophy and an approach, and then there's a reality of getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether I get it or not, it's really insignificant. It's more over the process and the quest for it.
Nice.
But it's unique because, we're in a very, we're in a little town on a little island,
Mm-hmm.
is, Forbes coming down here? Yeah, because of because of Sea Island and such. But, is Michelin coming down this way? Probably not. I wasn't in Chicago, and how many fucking amazing restaurants are there?
Mm-hmm.
At first it was just San Francisco and New York, and so there's aspects of it,
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna shift again. If you're taking a castaway to an island, you can bring 3 ingredients only. What are you cooking?
3 ingredients. Well, the first thing would be probably salt. But then if it's an island in the ocean, I could probably harvest the salt, so I'll leave the salt at home. But if it's like Roosevelt Island, in the East River, then then I might have to change that answer. Wow. What am I taking with me, ingredient-wise? That's a good question. I'd probably have, I would like to think that on this island there would be some things that I can forage and I can, harvest and cultivate and grow. Oh man, let's see, what's a clever answer and what's the real answer? Probably some sort of oil. So an olive oil, a grapeseed oil, probably vinegar, because acid is as important as salt. And if I'm able to get the salt from the sea, I'll need something to balance. So I'm going to say, vinegar. And then, can I bring a cow with me?
Yes.
All right, so I'll bring a cow.
Yeah, if it's in the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to have to be a pretty big boat. But yeah, I'd bring a cow.
Nice.
Yeah. Or maybe I'd bring 2 cows.
Only one.
Only one?
Yes.
All right. So 1 cow.
So, professionally speaking, who has been your biggest influence?
Parents on the front, parents on the front. And then, TK, Grant, they would obviously be up there. Some of the people that, I was fortunate enough to work with at Sea Island, my wife, very inspirational, watching her drive and her ability to just captivate an audience. It's, I'd say that's a pretty accurate assessment.
Does eating in a Michelin-star restaurant guarantee a good meal?
No, and probably one of the worst meals I've had in my life was that one.
Interesting.
And we were treated like second class citizens, and my money was just as green as the guy sitting next to me. And they put us in on a table that was close to a service area, and the service staff was very loud, which was weird because at that level, you shouldn't notice them. And the windows overlooked the city, and they were empty, and the seat was very uncomfortable. And it started with my wife giving her coat to be checked, and the coat, a static shock occurred. And when I say the fucking coat check would not take the coat, I'm not kidding you. We walked into the dining room with her fucking coat, and her coat was on the back of her chair. Wow. I'm like, this is just absolutely fucking insane. Mm-hmm. Okay? And mind you, this was probably about 10, 15 years ago. and the price was I mean, it was up there. So, and then the food was good. It wasn't like there was the expectation, and I say expectation because I think it's very important to meet that. My expectation was not met, and I don't, I'm not like hypercritical, or I just think some things were fundamentally wrong with, if I have something that has foie gras in it, it should not be gritty, and it was gritty. I mean, foie gras is about the luscious, velvety, melt in your mouth. It's like almost like chocolate, in a sense, and it wasn't handled in that regard. The seats that surrounded the windows weren't given to us, and we asked, "Hey, is there any chance we can go sit over there?" "Oh no." "Okay, cool, no big deal." So we sat, and just one thing after the other. My wife was like, "Look, we've been, down in Burgundy, and we've just been eating like, speaking of foie, like we've been eating like geese that they were, hey, can we do this?" "No." "Is there any chance I can have white meat? Because I don't want to have red meat." The waiter comes back. "It's veal. The chef said he'll prepare veal." And she says, "Well, that's not really that's not really white meat. In France it is." And we really should have just like walked up and got out of there at that point, but didn't want to make a scene or anything. But anyway, fast forward to like course 3 or 4, the sommelier brings by this wine bottle that was bigger than he was, and he speaks of it, and my wife corrects him.
How did he take it?
"Oh, oh my God, you're right." And I was just sitting there, I was like, fuck yeah, and like, I could have taken him and body fucking slammed him, but it wasn't it wasn't even remotely as effective as those few words out of her mouth. And I was like, fuck yeah. It was awesome just to watch like the life of him, and he realized for a second that although he was working in this Michelin star, a very high-end restaurant, world renowned, he was still missing, or he just, the hubris that he possessed left it. Mm-hmm. And it was fun to see, because it was that hubris that prevented him from being hospitable. So once that hubris left, okay, and it left for whatever reason it was, because he was corrected, or he knew that at that point we were industry people, whatever it was, by the 5th course we were sitting by the fucking window.
So in plain English, he was put in his place.
He was, and it was awesome. And then we get to the end of the fucking meal, and we've been traveling. And I call the banks, and I'm like, "Look, we're traveling, blah, blah, blah." I shared up, put the credit card down, and it was declined. And I'm like, motherfucker. And at this point, we were probably one of a few tables left in the restaurant, and it's like the entirety of the staff was like around us, surrounding us, looking at us like, "We got you." And anyway, I called the bank, and needless to say, we walked out of there, and it was about a $2,100 story to tell. It was a $2,100 story to tell. It sure as hell wasn't a $2,100 meal. And so to answer your question, no.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's not. And it's really tough because, you talk about expectations, and they're that much greater, You walk through that corridor that's narrowing to get into the dining room of Linea, or you walk through that blue door, or you drive through the gates of, Sea Island, or some of these, prestigious resorts and restaurants and such. And the expectation is that much greater than it is when you drive through the, drive-through. And at the end of the day, you're not going to make everybody happy, but you have to try to put your best foot forward in doing so. And
how much importance do you give to online reviews?
That's a great question, or that's awesome, because there's two things. Like, if I put something in front of you and you're like, "Wow, this is the best thing I've ever eaten," and I'm not satisfied with it, it evokes a feeling, mm-hmm. right? If I put something that I'm just like, "Wow, I'm blown away with," and I put it in front of you, and you say, this isn't good, that evokes another feeling as well.
Correct.
So you got to take it, with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is, they'll say possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, perception is 9/10 of reality. Okay. And someone's perception of what occurred here is their reality. And I have to look at it in that regard. Hopefully it's not my reality. Hopefully it's not what occurred. But at the end of the day, good, bad, or indifferent, or whatever it is that I did, it elicited that response. I don't want that response.
So when these guests that you speak of try your food, what do you want them to feel?
It's nourishment, mind, body, soul, stomach. I want them, I want it to feed so much more than just their gullet, But, obviously a connection, if you're lucky enough to evoke, a memory. I think some of the best compliments are, my grandmother or my uncle or my mother or my father. Anytime you can get that type of emotion out of somebody, it's a blessing.
So if you had to have one final service, who's sitting at the table?
My mom and dad.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I've met your mother. I was not lucky enough to meet your father, but
and my dad, it's when he was sick. He was sick for a while, and I think when I was in California, he's like, "When are you coming home so we can open a restaurant together?" That's what he said.
Do you wish?
So this is kind of an homage to them. This is a tribute to them.
That is awesome.
That's
awesome. So final section, we call it dessert. We do rapid fire questions, just whatever comes to mind. Favorite herb?
Man. Right now, this time of year, with everything that's popping, basil.
Cool. Sweet or savory?
Oh, I got a terrible sweet tooth. I've got a terrible sweet tooth. I will eat garbage sugar stuff. But garbage savory stuff, I can't do. So I'll say sweet.
Butter or olive oil?
Well, right now, with you say basil, it's tough not to go with olive oil. But I mean, butter is butter. So
Butter's butter. Brunch or dinner?
Did you say brunch or dinner?
Yeah.
Fuck brunch. No, I mean, listen, I love brunch. I love cooking brunch. But brunch is like, everyone tells you like, hey, you should do a brunch. You should do a brunch. So you open for brunch and nobody comes for brunch, at least in this area. So brunch is tough. It's the most fun food to cook. But yeah, it's like soup. You should make soup. You should make soup. You make soup. Nobody orders it. You throw it away. Somebody orders soup. So I'll say, ugh. I'll say dinner because I love preparing brunch, but I really love eating dinner.
Mm-hmm. Tweezers, tool or toy?
Oh, this is funny. Well, I got hands like feet, and they became a lot more dexterous as I was peeling eggshells and as I was peeling cherry tomatoes and grapes and things like that. But when you want placement of something, I think there's an application for a tweezer. But what's funny is, coming up, everyone was like, no tongs. Tongs break the food. And a fucking tweezer's a tong. I mean, no, but so it's almost like hypocritical, that some of these like tong haters have become tweezer lovers. But do I have a set of tweezers? Do I have tweezers? Yeah, I do. Do I use them always? Yeah, sometimes.
One chef you like to do a cook-off with?
A cook-off? A challenge?
Yeah.
Nobody. I wouldn't want to challenge because I would. The better question would be, who would I love to cook a meal with? for me. Yeah, everybody that I've worked with throughout my career, from a commis to the chef himself, I would love to cook a meal with those people.
Cool. Cast iron or non-stick?
You can get non-stick properties with a good cast iron. So for versatility's sake, I'm going to go cast iron.
Sourdough or baguette?
I'm going to go baguette. I love a good sourdough, but sometimes you want the bread to be a quiet complement and accompaniment to what it is. And sourdough is such a robust, beautiful flavor. You know, you don't want to, you don't get a nice bourbon and add Coke to it.
Correct.
So.
Farm or sea?
Well, if I'm going to stick on the lines of versatility, I mean, probably going to have to say farm. But when we lived in Apalachicola and had our restaurant there, I mean, fuck, that was just amazing. It was like a kid in a candy shop. So I'm going to say both. I'm going to break the rule.
You can break the rule, chef. Legacy or legend?
I think at the moment, legend, but as time prevails, legacy. And what it is that you leave with people is so very important.
It is. Rice or potatoes?
Man. Some of the dishes that you get from, Central and South America that have potatoes in the stew that's served over rice is just so delicious and awesome.
Are you saying both again?
I'm fucking going both.
Michelin or James Beard?
Oh, man. So there's a lot. Okay, so to get 3-star Michelin, okay, you have to do 3-star things. Okay, going back to like not being food related and being service in the front of the house related, the quality of the napkin that's in the bathroom dictates that. So if I have a Kraft brown paper towel that's served out of a dispenser, I cannot be 3-star. Okay, the best I can be is maybe 1-star or Bib Gourmand, right? So being the best one, shouldn't that be considered a 3? Right? So, and I don't know if people realize that. So 1-star Michelin, Bib Gourmet or Bib Gourmand, which we got up in Chicago one year, that is a feat in and of itself. I will never be a 3-star Michelin chef for various different reasons. And maybe Bib Gourmand. But in that realm, if I got the 2 or the 1, that is a feat and an accomplishment and should be regarded as such, right? If Thomas got a 2, that would be catastrophic for him, right? Or any 3-star Michelin getting a 2, that's a failure, right? That's a failure. But if someone's going for a 2 and they get the 2, that's pretty special and unique, So I think there's a misunderstanding with that system. So, and then James Beard is, there are some political things that have occurred over the past few years. I think at the end of the day, to be recognized for what it is that you do, no matter what it is, whether it be you asking me to do this today, whether it be the local mullet rapper doing a quick article about us, whether it's Bon Appetit or Food and Wine or, Michelin or any, to be recognized is just so special.
Yeah.
And I don't really think one recognition is better than the other. I'm sure the reach of some of those is greater. And as an entrepreneur, I would probably have to, maybe side with, Beard or Michelin. But at the end of the day, just being recognized for what it is. And I think that recognition, it comes out in so many different ways. Somebody comes to your restaurant again, that's recognition. That's recognition right there. And that's something that we all should be proud of and thankful for.
That's amazing. So you're about to be taken into a ship, into another world. What's your last meal?
Such a morbid thought. Is there not going to be food on this new place?
Very different.
Very different? All right. I would probably go back to the time our daughter prepared for us a meal for Valentine's Day. She went about and grabbed some of our cookbooks while we were working. And she's probably about 13, 14 or so at the time. And she made a Valentine's Day dinner for Ryan and myself when we came back from work. It would be that meal.
That's awesome. Chef, thank you so much for being in episode 1 of 86 Special.
My pleasure. What a treat.
Thank you so much.
Fun chatting. It's fun to go back and we don't get a chance to recount or go back and think about the things that have gotten us in the place that we're in right now.
And that is the idea, to
And this
basically
was-
just stop for a minute and think of where we are.
And this was real special. So thank you.
Thank you, Chef.
Cheers, brother.
What did you hear out on the street? Why do you care? It's rinse and repeat. Picture can change after feeling some heat. Bubbles and edges raised up on me. Call it a day, call it a night. As long as you call me on time, who would mind? Be 86 Special back up in lights. Alright.